On an April afternoon in 1974, the Florida sun hung heavy in the sky, casting a quiet light over the blackened remains of a recent brush fire. Amid the scorched grass and smoking earth, something metallic caught the eye of a passing family. It wasn't big, it didn't glow or hum. It simply sat there, perfectly round, gleaming, and out of place. The family, known as the Betts, could not have known then that this small silver sphere, about the size of a bowling ball, would soon become the center of one of the most confounding mysteries ever to emerge from American soil. A mystery that would lure in scientists, skeptics, government officials, and UFO researchers alike. And yet, for all the attention and investigation it would spark, not a single person could answer the simplest question of all. Where did it come from? So fasten your seatbelt, because what you're about to hear is anything but ordinary. But first, you might just unlock a little cosmic luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. The story began on Fort George Island, a quiet stretch of land in northern Florida where the Betts family owned a secluded estate. They were out for a walk on their property when they stumbled upon it, an 8-inch metal sphere lying in the ashes of the fire. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than an old cannonball or a discarded piece of machinery. But closer inspection changed everything. The surface was flawless. No seams, no markings, just a mirror-like polish that reflected the world with eerie perfection. It felt too heavy for its size, weighing over 20 pounds. Stranger still, it bore no signs of weathering, no corrosion, and no impact damage, despite lying in the open ground scorched by fire. Curious but unalarmed, the family took the sphere home. They set it near a window as a conversation piece, believing it to be an antique or perhaps a piece of naval equipment lost long ago. But in doing so, they unknowingly brought something far stranger into their lives. At first, the sphere sat silently, unmoving and inert, but soon oddities began to surface. It would respond softly at first to certain sounds, especially music. Then it would roll, but not randomly. It would move as if it were aware, adjusting direction mid-motion, even climbing slight inclines without assistance. What the Betts family had thought was a forgotten relic might not have been forgotten at all. It might not have even been from this world. One quiet afternoon, Terry Betts, the eldest son, was playing guitar in the living room. The notes drifted through the air, soft and unassuming, until something caught his eye. The sphere, resting calmly on the floor nearby, had begun to vibrate. Not in a violent, erratic way, but with a subtle, rhythmic pulse, almost like it was listening. Terry dismissed it at first, assuming it was just a simple case of acoustic resonance. After all, metal objects vibrate with sound all the time. But then it happened again, and again. And then the vibration began to sync with the tempo of the music, following chords, pulsing to strums, responding. That's when the fear crept in. The sphere didn't just react to sound, it moved on its own. With no one touching it, it would roll across the floor in a deliberate line. When it reached a wall, it would stop just short of impact, never hitting anything. Sometimes it would change direction entirely, as if guided by an unseen hand. On several occasions, it even rolled uphill on a slight incline, defying gravity with an ease that made no sense at all. The Betts family began performing small tests. They would place the sphere at the center of the room, mark its location, and watch. It would move on its own, reversing course suddenly, spinning in place, then coming to a complete and unnatural stop. What terrified them most wasn't the movement itself, but the sense of intelligence behind it. It wasn't random. It wasn't mechanical, it was almost curious. Soon, word of the strange object spread beyond the walls of the Betts' home. A local Jacksonville newspaper ran a feature calling it the mysterious sphere at Betts' Castle. Reporters came, intrigued not just by the object but by the house itself, an old mansion with a history of ghost stories and whispered legends. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. A high-functioning, respected family claiming supernatural events in a house already shadowed by lore. But Jerry Betts, the matriarch, was no wide-eyed believer. She was a businesswoman, pragmatic, grounded, and deeply respected in the local community. Her willingness to go public gave the story unexpected credibility. If she was speaking up, people reasoned maybe this wasn't just a hoax or a family fantasy. Maybe something real was happening, and whatever it was, it had only just begun. Within days, the Betts family home transformed from a quiet retreat into the epicenter of national curiosity. News vans lined the narrow road leading up to their estate. Journalists, amateur investigators, self-proclaimed UFO hunters, and even local politicians came knocking, all hoping to witness the so-called intelligent sphere in action. Many brought cameras, microphones, and even crude scientific tools. What they saw stunned them. The sphere moved exactly as described, stopping short of walls, reversing direction mid-roll, even reacting to changes in pitch and tone when people spoke or played instruments. Some observers noted that it seemed to prefer certain individuals, following them more often than others. A few even claimed to feel a subtle hum or energy when standing close to it. By this point, the Betts family had begun keeping a log of the object's behavior, documenting times, temperatures, sound levels, and movement patterns. But the more they observed, the less sense it made. There were no gears, no seams. No battery ports, wiring, or even indentations. The object was impossibly simple and impossibly complex at the same time. Then the U.S. Navy got involved. Officials from the nearby Cecil Field Naval Air Station contacted the family directly. They expressed interest in examining the object, offering assurances that it would be returned safely. With growing concern over the sphere's potential origin and perhaps its purpose, the Betts family agreed. The sphere was transported under escort to the Navy base. There, technicians ran it through a battery of tests. Standard X-rays, density scans, material sampling, but nothing behaved as expected. The outer shell appeared to be stainless steel, and yet standard X-ray equipment couldn't penetrate it. Its density was far beyond anything they'd seen before. The Navy had to transfer it to a different facility with more advanced imaging capabilities just to see inside. What they found only deepened the mystery. Inside the hollow chamber were 3 smaller metallic spheres, each suspended in space, with no obvious mechanism holding them in place. At the base was a fine powdery substance, possibly sand, possibly something else. No internal wiring, no obvious circuitry, and no known industrial signature. In short, it matched nothing in their records. Then there was the triangle. Etched faintly onto one side of the sphere was a small, near-invisible triangular marking. At first, experts theorized this could be a manufacturing symbol or perhaps a design feature to create imbalance for motion. But witnesses quickly dismissed that. The sphere didn't roll randomly, it moved with intent. It avoided obstacles, it changed direction without force. When pressed for answers, the Navy released a short, dry statement. The object is not dangerous and does not appear to be of U.S. military origin. That was it. No details, no explanation. But for the public, that silence said everything. If the government didn't know what it was, why were they so eager to study it? And if they did know, why weren't they telling anyone? The questions only multiplied. And then, the most unexpected figure of all entered the scene. As media attention reached a fever pitch and government agencies remained tight-lipped, one name suddenly surfaced, turning a bizarre local story into a case of national intrigue. Dr. J. Allen Hynek. To those unfamiliar with UFO research, the name may mean little. But to anyone following the unexplained, Hynek was nothing short of a legend. An astronomer by training, Hynek had served as the chief scientific advisor for Project Blue Book, the U.S. Air Force's official investigation into unidentified flying objects. Once a staunch skeptic, his decades of exposure to unexplained cases had gradually shifted his stance. He became one of the first respected scientists to openly suggest that some UFO encounters might not be explainable through conventional science. So when he personally requested to visit the Betts family and study the sphere firsthand, everything changed. Hynek wasn't coming to write a tabloid article. He was coming to investigate. He arrived discreetly, accompanied by a small team, and stayed at the Betts' home for several days. Unlike the journalists before him, he wasn't interested in sensationalism. He wanted data. He observed the sphere's movements, ran tests on its surface magnetism, and monitored its behavior in response to sound, heat, and human presence. But perhaps most famously, one night he asked to sleep in the same room as the sphere. When Jerry Betts asked him why, he answered simply, "I want to see if it moves when no one is watching." That night, he set up a series of measuring devices and motion detectors. No one else was allowed in the room. According to members of the family and several assistants, something did happen, though the exact details were never officially published. What is known is that Hynek left the next morning looking both fascinated and disturbed, and declined to comment publicly on his findings. He never issued a formal report, but his presence legitimized the mystery in a way no journalist or Navy officer ever could. Following Hynek's visit, interest in the Betts sphere exploded. It was selected as a featured object at a 1975 scientific symposium organized by the National Enquirer, a rare event that brought together physicists, psychologists, engineers, and researchers from both conventional and fringe backgrounds. At the symposium, the sphere was tested again under more controlled conditions, and once more it stunned the room. Observers reported that it moved on its own, even on smooth surfaces that slanted downward. In one case, it rolled uphill slowly, steadily, against the pull of gravity. Scientists noted it appeared to respond to focused sound waves, changing direction or halting movement when specific frequencies were applied. Then came the most chilling claim of all. Dr. James Harder, a physicist in attendance, analyzed the internal X-ray data and made a startling announcement. He suggested that the small spheres inside the object might be composed of elements with atomic weights beyond anything known to man, surpassing atomic number 40. And if anyone attempted to drill into the shell, he warned, it could potentially result in an explosive release of energy, something on the scale of a nuclear detonation. The room fell silent. Was this truly a relic of alien origin? Or had humanity stumbled upon a lost piece of technology from its own forgotten past? No one had answers, only the growing sense that the deeper they looked, the less they understood. As the media frenzy quieted and the official investigations hit a wall, theories about the Betts sphere began to multiply, each more astonishing than the last. Some physicists speculated that the object might be part of a classified military program, a high-precision gyroscopic device, perhaps once used in satellite stabilization or advanced missile guidance systems. Its smooth movements, self-correction, and resistance to gravity were eerily similar to how inertial navigation systems operate. But that raised an unsettling question. If it was military, whose military was it? No U.S. agency claimed ownership, and no known country at the time had developed such compact technology with those capabilities. Others took the leap further, proposing that the sphere was not of human origin at all. According to this theory, the object might be an autonomous extraterrestrial probe dropped to Earth as part of a long-term observation effort. Like a deep-sea drone scanning the ocean floor, it may have been quietly collecting data on human behavior, environmental change, or even electromagnetic activity. Some noted how its ability to respond to sound, heat, and movement seemed almost biological, as if it were more than just a machine. The theory sounded far-fetched until the past came knocking. A local artist named James Derling Jones stepped forward, claiming that 3 years before the discovery, he had transported a batch of metallic spheres, very similar in size and appearance, on the roof of his Volkswagen. He said they were intended for an art installation, but some may have fallen off en route. His story was immediately picked up by newspapers eager to find a rational explanation. Could the Betts sphere have simply been a runaway art piece? Could its unusual behavior have been nothing more than a coincidence of weight distribution and imagination? The Betts family and those who had observed the sphere firsthand were not convinced. For one, Jones's spheres were described as hollow and lightweight, not the dense, sealed mystery in the Betts household. And more importantly, none of his spheres had moved on their own. His claim, while intriguing, lacked any physical proof that could be tied to the object under scrutiny. Then came yet another theory, the ball check valve. This explanation suggested that the sphere was an industrial component, commonly used in pipelines and fluid systems to regulate pressure. Several experts confirmed that such valves do exist and can sometimes resemble smooth metallic balls. But again, the Bet sphere didn't match known specifications. It had no manufacturing ID, no pitting or signs of industrial wear, and its interior structure, containing smaller spheres and powder, wasn't found in any standard design. The public began to divide into two camps. One believed the sphere was simply a mundane object, made mysterious by coincidence, media hype, and wishful thinking. The other was convinced it was evidence of something bigger, a technology or intelligence that had quietly slipped through the cracks of official understanding. But just when the story seemed to fade from public consciousness, something remarkable happened. In 2023, nearly half a century after the sphere was found, the Department of Defense released new footage, captured by a Reaper drone operating over the Middle East. In the video, a metallic sphere could be seen flying at high speed, hovering midair with no wings, no visible propulsion, and no heat signature. Military analysts admitted they had no explanation. And to those who remembered the Bet sphere, the similarity was impossible to ignore. Round, metallic, silent, agile, the same impossible geometry, the same absence of answers, but the real surprise was still to come. While the 2023 drone footage reignited global interest in metallic spheres, it wasn't an isolated incident. Months earlier, in 2016, a reconnaissance aircraft operating over Mosul, Iraq, had recorded something eerily similar, a floating orb, spherical and featureless, that defied radar tracking and moved without sound or heat emission. Once classified, the footage had only recently entered public discussion. And now, there were two documented sightings of metallic spheres operating beyond the limits of known technology and decades apart. But these modern cases weren't alone in their strangeness. Across the Pacific Ocean, another mystery was unfolding. In 2023, a research team led by Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb launched an expedition off the coast of Papua New Guinea. Their mission, to retrieve fragments of a meteor that had plunged into the sea in 2014, one believed to have been of interstellar origin. After 2 weeks of dredging the ocean floor, what they found was astonishing. Hundreds of tiny metallic spheres, some no larger than grains of sand. But under the microscope, these fragments told a story no geologist could explain. They were composed of nickel, iron, and exotic trace elements, but in ratios and crystal structures not found in nature. Not on Earth and not in any meteorite ever studied. Some scientists cautiously called them technological relics. Others weren't so cautious. They believed these could be the remains of a non-human craft shattered on atmospheric entry. Suddenly, the idea of intelligent spheres, once laughed off as a Florida oddity, didn't seem so absurd. And then archaeologists weighed in. In the ruins of Teotihuacan, beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent in Mexico, researchers uncovered hundreds of ancient clay spheres ranging from 1.5 to 5 inches in diameter. They were coated in pyrite, a metallic mineral that shimmered like polished gold. Hidden for centuries in sealed underground chambers, no one knows why they were placed there or by whom. So now we have a pattern, a sphere in Florida that moves with intent, spheres in the sea that bear no earthly fingerprint, spheres in the sky that outmaneuver modern aircraft, and spheres beneath the ground left by civilizations long vanished. What connects them? Is it mere coincidence that these orbs appear in every domain, land, sea, sky, and even under ancient stone? Or are we seeing pieces of a much larger puzzle that has yet to reveal its shape? Perhaps the Bet sphere was never alone, perhaps it was never meant to be found, or maybe it was meant to be found all along. A quiet observer, a forgotten messenger, a warning, or a key. And if that's true, what happens when the others start waking up?